What is up, New Beginnings Church family? Welcome to your small group experience. Let's do this. We are in a series on Sunday morning called Made for More. And the whole premise is this: whatever you imagine God to be, He's more. Whatever it is that you think God wants to do in you and through you, there is more. Whatever you think life is, Jesus said, I have come that you might have life, but not just an existent life. He goes, I've come that you might have life, and there's that word, more abundantly. And so this series is trying to get you into the more of who God is. And this past week, we did something very special. We took Holy Communion, and we said sometimes in life there's a meal, but sometimes it's more than just a meal. Now, I don't know about you, but I love food. I'm a steak guy. So if you take me to one of those Brazilian steakhouses and you start just letting red meat and pork and chicken and you name it, I'm so excited. As a matter of fact, I remember I had a friend take me out for my 40th birthday. And how many of you know, you cross a certain age where when you turn 32, you're like, who cares? Maybe you turn 27, not a big deal. But you get into those big round numbers like 40 and you're like, these are big ones, right? And so my buddy took me out for a meal. But he said, I wanted to be more than a meal. And so he took me to this incredible steakhouse and he goes, Todd, we're going to share a tomahawk together. And so he buys this tomahawk thing, which is basically this just big giant bone with a slab of meat hanging off the side of it. And so we're carving in and cutting in. And then all of a sudden you get down to the bone. I'm like, are we done? He goes, no, Todd, you take the bone. There's marrow in here. You just gnaw on the bone. And it's a tomahawk, right? And so sometimes you have a steak, and then sometimes you're like, no, this is more than a meal. This is a celebration. It's my birthday. My friend's doing something fun for me, and I want to step into the moment of this incredible meal. Well, I just want you to know this, that God loves food. And the reason why I know that is because when I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, I found food everywhere. God's doing miracles with food, whether He's multiplying oil or having manna show up every morning in the desert for the children of God. When you get to the New Testament, Jesus seems to be surrounded by food. His first miracle is turning water into wine. He heals Peter's mom, but then says, hey, can you make us some lunch? He does all these moments where he takes a little boy's lunchbox and he feeds 5,000 people, not including women and children. He has the holy meal from Passover, and he says this is the new covenant. And then, of course, lastly, as we'll get to today, on the road to Emmaus with just two disciples sitting down at the end of a long 7-mile walk and saying, hey, let's just have a meal and hang out. And look what happens in these moments. And so if you're taking notes, the first thing I need you to recognize is that God is personal, God is relational, and God likes food. Now, again, the reason why I think is interesting, because what I think is that even when you look at your biology will indicate to you that as you sit with friends and you share a meal, your body releases oxytocin. And what that is a pair bonding chemical. It's the same type of chemical that's released when you're around somebody the opposite sex and you get those funny feelings and you think, ooh, my gosh, got a little puppy love. I'm starting to fall for this person. Oxytocin is a part of that. So it's a pair bonding. And again, this isn't romantic. This is about friendship. I'm connected to these people because we sat and we shared a meal together. And in the 3 meals that I'm going to look at today, I want to show you a common theme. And the most common theme and the obvious thing is this: every time there was a meal, it was more than a meal. Something significant was going on. But the other thing that's interesting about all 3 of these stories is that in all 3 of them, Jesus uses the phrase blessed, broken, given. And I think that's interesting. Anytime I see patterns in the Bible like that, I see Jesus repeating himself like that, I'm like, pay attention. There's maybe something meaningful in the pattern. And the pattern was, again, he would take the food, he would take the bread, and he would bless it, or he would give God thanks for it. Then he would break the bread, and then he would give it. And I thought, man, I think this is the image of the gospel. The image of the gospel is that Jesus is blessed by God or anointed by God as the Christ, the anointed one, right? And then he's broken on that cross for the sins of humanity so that salvation can be given to all. I find that this is the same pattern of your life experience walking with Jesus usually. Usually when you meet Jesus for the very first time and it's a profound moment, something overwhelms you. I think you do have those pair bonding chemicals release as you attach yourself to the person and the life of Christ. And you start off your Christian journey many times, not always, but many times with this high almost, this oh my gosh, I'm just so excited and passionate about what Jesus is doing in me. And I start off feeling so blessed, right? But then if you keep journeying with God, you realize, well, walking with Jesus doesn't mean he gives me everything that I want, that every prayer is answered, that everything goes my ways, that I'm walking the yellow brick road and everything's turning up petunias. But actually, no, life is challenging. Life is hard. Life is difficult at times. I have to deal with loss and grief. And sometimes part of my breaking experience is God breaking me of me. And the breaking part is saying, you know what, Todd, there's a little bit too much pride, there's a little too much ego, there's a little too much self. And I want that to be broken off of you so that one day you can be fully given. Because if you will empty yourself of ego and pride, you will be so filled with the Spirit of God that it will be easy to give you away to the world, to give you to create hope and healing in other people. And so anyway, this is the journey, these three stories. The first one is this. Again, it's the feeding of the 5,000. It says that the disciples come to Jesus and say, hey, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. We just got this one kid's lunchbox. That's all we have. And he goes, bring them here to me. And he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and he broke and he gave the loaves to the disciples. And the disciples then gave to the multitudes. So many cool things in this story. It's one of the only stories that is duplicated in all 4 gospel accounts. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all record this story. This would have been hard to keep a secret. How do you feed 5,000 people miraculously and the word and the chatter not spread throughout the land? That would be incredible. As a matter of fact, we know it because they follow him, and later Jesus says, hey, the only reason you're following me is because I fed you. You're not following me because you trust in me. And so this was a big deal. But in that moment, you find that it was more than just a meal. It was a miracle, right? For you to have a meal with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, that's just a good meal. But if you take your meal and you put it in the hands of Jesus, it can become more than a meal. It can become a miracle. And sometimes in your life, you do need a miracle. Sometimes you're praying for God to completely defy the odds of math and science. And you're like, God, I need you to heal my body, or I need you to get me out of this jam, or I need you to help, just engage my friend or my loved one with salvation. God, I'm asking for the miraculous. And absolutely, you got to pray those prayers. And what we want to do is this. This is what I would call the principle of multiplication. What we want to do is come to God and give God whatever it is that we have in our hands. And if we'll put it in his hands, well, then God can do a miracle and God can multiply it. Sometimes we don't receive the miracle because we're too busy holding on to our little 2 fish and 5 loaves. And you know what's interesting is that we know deep down that the 2 fish and 5 loaves won't solve everything, but we think if I'll just hoard on to it, it'll make me feel better. We're actually better off taking that little lunchbox and putting it into the hands of Jesus. And so something that you always want to be thinking of is like, God, how do I take what's in my hands? And I want to put it in your hands because I want to put it in the hands of the miracle worker and trust that sometimes in my life, I need more than just a meal. I need a miracle. But remember, there's a temptation in this. The temptation for us would be to say, hey, I'm going to be like those people and only follow Jesus for the miracle. Or we could say it like this. Sometimes my faith is so kind of immature that I end up only going to God when I'm in desperate need. Whereas the mature follower of Jesus is like, no, I walk with God whether I have need or not. I walk with God whether I feel great or not. Like, those are irrelevant. Jesus is the Lord and Savior of the world, regardless of my issue, lack, need, or problem, or circumstances. I'm following him no matter what. But the temptation would be that sometimes we only go to God when we desperately need a miracle. And I would say, let's go beyond that, because there's another meal that Jesus wants to introduce you to. It's not the meal of the miracle. It's deeper than that. This is the next one. In Matthew chapter 26, this is near the end. This is the night that he would be betrayed. This is the night that they gather together in a room to celebrate Passover. And at the Passover meal, Jesus does something so spiritually profound. He takes a Passover meal that they had celebrated for thousands of years and he changes it. And this is what he says. It says, as they were eating, Jesus took the bread, he blessed it, he broke it, and he gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat. This is my body. Now, again, before they had always celebrated Passover with bread. It was called a matzah bread. It was unleavened because they had to flee Egypt so fast. And so there's all kinds of symbolism to this, but Jesus doesn't point back to the Exodus when he holds the bread like they would have done for thousands of years. He actually points to himself and he goes, my body is this bread. It will be broken on your behalf. And then he took the cup and gave thanks, and he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood, the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins." See, I love this meal. Oh, this meal is so different. This meal is not for the masses. And this meal is not even a miracle. This meal is made for that smaller group of people who are walking with Jesus in a more personal way. They're walking with God in their daily lives. And they've come to this moment where Jesus is going to give them not just a meal, but a ritual, a sacrament, right? Jesus, if you don't know this, gives 2 sacraments for all of his followers to actually participate in. One of them is Holy Communion, and the other one is baptism. And he goes, these 2 sacraments are so important because in these sacraments, you look to the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Think about it. What is communion? He goes, my body's broken, my blood is shed for the forgiveness of sins. That is the cross. That is his death. But he goes, but baptism, after you say yes to me, after you experience what it is like to be born again, to become alive on the inside, he goes, that's baptism. Because in baptism, you let your old life slip into that watery tomb. And then just like 3 days later, I came up out of that grave with new life. I just want you to know you're going to come up out of that watery grave with resurrection, new life. And so in communion, you look to the cross, and in baptism, you look to the resurrection, and that is so powerful, right? And so we need these. We want these rituals, these sacraments in our life, because every time we go and take of Holy Communion, we're reminding ourselves this was more than a meal. It was a covenant. It was the pronouncement of a brand new type of relationship with God. It is going to change forevermore. And here's the temptation in this one, is that sometimes it's that, in the first one, you only go to God when you need a miracle. But in this temptation, the temptation is to only go to God when you're at church on Sunday morning, to only go to God on Christmas and Easter, to only go to God when there's a ritual of some sorts, and to limit God to the sacred and not realize that actually, if I invite God into my everyday life, everything could be sacred. And so don't ever limit God to just the ritual, because here's the third story, and it proves what I'm saying. In Luke chapter 24, after the death of Jesus, the disciples are in a state of dismay, discouragement, confusion. They're losing it. They don't know what to do. And it says that 2 of them decide they're headed to Emmaus. And it says in verse 13 of Luke 24, it says that on that same day, 2 of them were going to the village called Emmaus. It was about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked, they discussed with these things with each other, and then Jesus himself comes up and appears and walks alongside of them, but they were kept from recognizing Jesus. He was walking with them, but they didn't know who he was. Well, it says, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were just going to go further. But they urged him strongly, stay with us. It's nearly evening. The day is almost over. So he decides he'll go in and stay with them. And when he was at the table with them, Jesus took the bread. Here it is. He gave thanks. He blessed it. He broke it. And then he gave it to them. And then, now if you got a Bible and you're a Bible person, you need to circle or underline the word then, because this is kind of indicating causality, that because of this is happening, and that's what you want to pay attention to. Because they strongly urged Jesus and welcomed him into their home, and then not just welcomed him into their home, but welcomed him to the table, and then not just welcomed to the table, but said, here, you take it, you take the bread, and you pray. And what they did is that they invited Jesus into there's no ritual. This isn't church service. This isn't Saturday Sabbath. This isn't Passover. This isn't Sunday morning. This is none of those things. There's no miracle. He doesn't multiply the food. He doesn't do anything cool or fancy. Nothing crazy happens. It is just the simple and the mundane and the ordinary, eating a meal. And here's what I'm telling you, is that when you decide to invite Jesus into the simple, mundane, and ordinary parts of your life, you will begin to see him everywhere. And again, this is where you realize, oh no, these guys had more than a meal. It was way more than a meal. It was an invitation, right? It was an invitation to a revelation of saying, hey, sometimes I walk around and God is right next to me and I can't even sense it. Sometimes God is with me and I'm not even paying attention. Sometimes I got the TV on, sometimes I'm flipping, sometimes I got my AirPods in, and God is at work all around me, but sometimes I'm not even paying attention until I slow down and I tune out the noise of this world. And yes, maybe I pray and I need a miracle. Yes, I'm at church and I participate in the ritual. But even in my home, doing the most simple of simple things as eating a meal, I will say, God, I want you in my midst, even right here. And so, church, that's my encouragement to you, is to recognize that sometimes you're going to have a meal, but it'll be more than a meal if you will invite Jesus to sit at the table with you. I'll give you a few lasting notes. The first meal revealed his power, that power of the miraculous. The second meal, well, it revealed his purpose. He came to bring about a new relationship between you and God. But the third one, the third moment, the third meal, it reveals his presence. He goes, you know what I really want? You know, all God ever really wanted was to commune with you. That the image of salvation, some of us, we get it so wrong, and it's not your fault. And sometimes religious ideas or cartoon theology or whatever it is has impressed upon you this idea of what it means to be in the middle of the sacred, in the middle of the holy, to be with God. But watch this. This is the image of salvation according to Revelation chapter 3. Jesus said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone would just hear my voice and open up the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. I love what the New King James, it says this, is I will come in with and I will share a meal with them. So again, in their day and in their time, sitting down to share a meal with somebody was saying, hey, I want to fellowship with you. I want to do life together with you. And that was the invitation that Jesus gave to all of us. Sometimes you will need to go to him for the miracle. You should do that. Sometimes you absolutely want to be in the rhythm of ritual. Every Sunday morning, communion, baptism, be in the rhythm of ritual 100%. But I dare you to say, you know what if I just invited God into every aspect of my life? Because that's when your eyes will be open. And so, small group, I hope tonight you have an incredible time fellowshipping with one another, loving one another, praying for one another, and even maybe, just maybe, you will be taking Holy Communion together tonight as a group. So anyway, I bless you. I love you. May you be encouraged by this message. And may tonight as you gather together, may it be more than just a meal. Church, I love you so much. God bless you. I'll see you soon.